This story is inspired by real events. Names and places have been changed.
In the summer of 1999, Alex's world was a colorful, innocent place. It was a world of scraped knees, ice cream melting down your chin, and endless hours on the swing set in the backyard. His best friend, Sam, was always by his side. But Sam's best friend wasn't a person. It was a grimy white teddy bear he called Buddy. Sam said Buddy talked to him, that the bear told him secrets and gave him commands. Sam's dad would just laugh and say his son had an incredibly active imagination. But in the summer of 1999, that imagination, and Sam himself, simply vanished. 25 years later, on a chilly winter morning in 2024, Alex was in his parents' attic, rummaging through old boxes filled with dusty memories. He was there to clear out a lifetime of belongings, things that had been stored away and long forgotten. As he sifted through the boxes, his eyes fell on a grimy, white teddy bear sitting at the bottom of a sand-filled trunk. Buddy. Just seeing the bear was like a physical blow. It brought back a flood of memories from that long-ago summer. The search parties, the desperate pleas on the news, the silent grief of Sam's family. The entire town had searched for him, but Sam simply disappeared, as if he had never existed. And just like that, Buddy disappeared from their lives too. Alex felt a strange, unsettling chill course through him, a feeling that went beyond a simple memory. Alex carefully picked up the bear. The fabric was worn, and one of its button eyes was hanging by a thread. As he inspected it, he noticed a tiny zipper on the bear's chest. The zipper pull was almost completely gone, rusted away by time. Alex slowly and deliberately pulled it open. Tucked deep inside the stuffing was a small, folded piece of paper. His heart hammered in his chest. Was this some kind of clue? A note? A map to the secret place only Sam knew about? Alex carefully unfolded the paper. On it were complex scribbles, almost like a child's drawing, and a few letters. The scrawl looked like a child's imagination on paper. But below the scribbles, a single sentence was scrawled, a sentence that sent a jolt of cold dread down Alex's spine. It was here all along. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He kept rereading the note, trying to decipher its meaning. Was this the last thing his best friend had ever written? Or was it a message from the bear itself? The next day, Alex went back to the old neighborhood. He walked to the house where Sam's family used to live. It was abandoned, a hollowed-out shell of a home. The swing set in the backyard still stood, creaking slightly in the cold wind. He walked up to the side of the house, looking into what used to be Sam's bedroom window. The curtains were the same color, and he could see a small crack on the glass. As he approached it, he saw a small note taped to the window pane. It was a tiny piece of paper, and on it, written in Sam's handwriting, were two words: "Trust Buddy." A shiver ran through him. Alex knew for a fact that note had not been there when they left. Who wrote it? Sam? No, it couldn't be. The handwriting was too clean. The question swirled in his mind, tormenting him. After leaving the house, Alex went back to his own home and started looking at the teddy bear. He had found the small note in the zipper, but he was sure there was something else inside. He carefully removed the stuffing from the bear and found a small, old-fashioned voice recorder. The buttons on the recorder were rusted from years of dampness. Alex took the device, plugged it into an outlet, but it didn't work. He assumed the battery was dead, so he put in a new one. The device hummed to life with a faint static sound. But in the static, he heard a sound, a familiar sound that sent a jolt of recognition through him. It was Sam's voice. The voice from the recorder was Sam's, a hushed whisper. "Buddy told me what to do." The whispers grew louder and more frantic. Alex held the recorder in his hands, trembling. The voice on the recording grew louder and louder. "Buddy told me to hide." The voice on the recording was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. "Help me, Alex! Help me!" The sound of the scream was full of a child's terror and desperation. Alex was shaking. He was hearing his friend's voice, but it wasn't just a voice. It was a scream, a final plea, a record of a child's last moments.
The scream that tore through the quiet of Alex's apartment wasn't just a sound. It was a ghost. It echoed in his ears, a chilling, visceral echo of a terror from a quarter-century ago. He dropped the recorder, its plastic shell clattering against the hardwood floor. His breath caught in his throat. Sam's voice! Sam's voice! But it was impossibly young, filled with a panic that could only belong to a child facing something truly monstrous. The recorder lay there, its tiny red light blinking, a silent witness to a nightmare unfolding years too late. Alex stared at it, his mind racing. This wasn't just a random recording. It was a fragment of a lost moment, a window into the last terrified seconds of his best friend. He bent down, his hand shaking, and carefully picked up the device. He rewound it, played it again. The static, then the whisper, clearer this time. "Buddy, he told me to go where the shadows are long, where no one looks." Then the escalating panic, the scream, and finally a click, the sound of the recorder being turned off, or perhaps dropped. He listened to it countless times, straining to hear anything else, any other sound that might offer a clue. A distant rumble? A floorboard creak? But there was nothing. Just Sam's voice, a solitary beacon of terror in a void of silence. The mention of shadows are long and no one looks sent a fresh wave of dread through him. It sounded like something Buddy might have said, a cryptic clue meant for a child. Alex thought back to Sam and Buddy. Sam had always been inseparable from that bear. He'd talked to it for hours, creating elaborate worlds and adventures. But there was always something a little off. Sam would sometimes repeat things Buddy told him that were oddly specific, warnings about certain people, strange observations about the house. At the time, they'd all dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination. Now, that imagination felt like a dark prophecy. He needed to go back to that house. Not just the exterior, but inside. If Sam had recorded something, if Buddy was truly involved, then the house itself had to hold answers. He remembered the note on Sam's old window. Trust Buddy. It wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. The next morning, armed with the recorder and a flashlight, Alex drove back to the abandoned house. It felt colder now, even in the morning sun. The windows, once just empty eyes, seemed to watch him with a silent, eerie knowing. He found a broken window at the back and carefully climbed inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through broken panes made him jump. He made his way to Sam's old bedroom. It was exactly as he remembered it, yet utterly alien. The peeling wallpaper, the faint outline where his bed used to be, the empty closet. But as he scanned the room with his flashlight, he noticed something odd. Behind the warped, cheap particle board that made up the back of the closet, there was a faint discoloration on the wall. It was too low to be a water stain. He knelt, tracing it with his finger. It was sticky, almost like dried resin. And beneath it, just barely visible, was another symbol. A crudely drawn triangle with an eye in the center, identical to the one he had seen in the scribbled note in Buddy. Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible static filled the air. not from the recorder in his hand, but seemingly from the room itself. It was a hum, a low thrumming that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The air grew colder, and a distinct, guttural whisper seemed to emanate from the wall itself, right where the symbol was. It wasn't Sam's voice this time. It was deeper, older, and infinitely more chilling. "He trusted me. And so will you."
Alex stumbled back from the wall, the voice still ringing in his ears. It was a cold, alien sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He shone the flashlight on the symbol again, the crude triangle with the single malevolent eye. He felt a deep, primal fear, the kind that screamed at him to run, to get out of that house and never look back. But something held him in place. It was the whisper's chilling echo, "And so will you." He realized the voice had been speaking to him. It knew he was there. It was as if the house, or whatever was in it, was aware of his presence, waiting for him. Alex backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving the symbol on the wall. The hum grew louder, a low thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. He knew he was no longer alone in that house. Whatever had taken Sam was still there. He scrambled out of the house, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He didn't stop running until he was back in his car, the engine rumbling to life like a sigh of relief. He sat there for a long time, trying to calm his shaking hands. The recorder was still in his pocket, a tangible link to the terrifying truth. He had to know more. He had to find out what had happened to Sam and what that voice was. Alex spent the next few days in a daze, poring over old news articles about Sam's disappearance. The reports were all the same: missing child, no leads found, a tragic mystery. But now, with the voice on the recorder and the symbol on the wall, he had a lead. He needed to find out who else might have heard that voice or seen that symbol. He remembered a man, a local eccentric who had been fascinated by the house. His name was Mr. Harrison. He was the one who had written a book about the mysterious happenings in the neighborhood, a book that everyone else had dismissed as fiction. Alex found a copy of the book at a local library. The book was titled Echoes of the Void, a Local History of Unexplained Disappearances. As he flipped through the pages, he found a chapter dedicated to Sam's disappearance. It was filled with bizarre theories about ancient spirits and gateways to other dimensions. Alex, however, wasn't interested in the wild theories. He was interested in the details. He found a paragraph where Mr. Harrison had mentioned a strange symbol on the wall of Sam's house, a symbol that he'd seen in other places too. He'd also mentioned a strange humming sound that seemed to come from the ground itself. Alex's heart pounded. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't imagining it. Someone else had heard and seen these things. The next page had a picture of the symbol he had seen on the wall. Mr. Harrison had called it the Whispering Eye. The book led him to an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. Mr. Harrison had claimed it was a nexus of supernatural activity, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. As Alex drove to the factory, a sense of dread washed over him. He was no longer just an adult looking for answers. He was a man with a target on his back. Whatever had spoken to him in that house was now waiting for him. He parked his car far from the factory and approached on foot, flashlight in hand. The factory was a colossal, decaying skeleton of steel and brick. The air was colder here, filled with the metallic tang of rust and the musty smell of age. He found a small, unlocked door and slipped inside. The hum, the same one he'd heard in the house, was here too. But it was louder now, a low thrumming that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. As he walked deeper into the factory, he noticed the walls were covered with the symbol of the Whispering Eye. They were everywhere, scrawled on the walls, etched into the metal machinery, and even spray-painted on the floor. It was as if a legion of people had been obsessed with this symbol.
The hum in the factory was a living thing, a low, constant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It was a sound that didn't belong in the physical world, and it was getting louder. Alex's flashlight danced over the walls, revealing more and more of the whispering eye symbols. They were everywhere, drawn with a kind of desperate, frantic energy. It was as if the people who had been here were trying to tell him something. He walked deeper into the factory, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air was colder here, filled with the metallic tang of rust and the musty smell of age. He knew he wasn't just walking into an abandoned building. He was walking into a story that had been waiting for him for decades. Alex's flashlight beam landed on a small alcove in the wall. The hum was deafening here, and the air crackled with a strange, otherworldly energy. The walls in the alcove were covered with the whispering eye symbol, but unlike the others, these were not just drawn, they were etched into the brick with what looked like a sharp object, and they glowed with a faint, eerie light. In the center of the alcove, there was a small, dusty child's boot. Alex's breath hitched. He knew that boot. He had seen it in an old photograph of Sam, a photo taken on the day he disappeared. It was a size too big for Sam, a gift from his parents that he was supposed to grow into. Alex reached for the boot, his hand shaking. As he did, a voice, the same voice he had heard in the house, filled the air. "Don't touch," it whispered, a cold, slithering sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He pulled his hand back, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at the boot, a simple, mundane object, and realized it was something more. It was a breadcrumb left behind, a final piece of evidence. He knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this boot wasn't left here by accident. It was placed here by something, or someone, who wanted to be found. Suddenly, the hum stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. The faint light from the etched symbols on the wall faded, and the room was plunged into darkness. Alex's flashlight died, leaving him in a pitch-black abyss. He stood there, frozen in fear, the only sound his own ragged breathing. Then, from the darkness, a voice whispered, right in his ear, "We're not finished yet."
The darkness in the factory was absolute, a suffocating void that pressed in on Alex from all sides. He stood frozen, the whisper still echoing in his ear. "We're not finished yet." The voice was cold, inhuman, and it seemed to come from the very air he was breathing. The flashlight in his hand was useless, a dead piece of plastic. He fumbled in his pocket for his phone, his fingers trembling, and managed to turn on its light. The small beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a single horrifying sight. The space where the boot had been was now empty. A wave of nausea washed over him. The boot hadn't been an object. It was a clue, a marker, and now it was gone. The voice had taken it. He knew with a chilling certainty that whatever was in this factory wasn't just a lingering spirit, it was a hunter, and it had just let him know that he was the prey. He backed away slowly, the light from his phone casting long, dancing shadows on the rusted-out machinery. The hum was gone, replaced by a deafening silence, the silence of a predator waiting for its prey to make a move. He made his way to the small door he had entered through, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He burst out of the factory and into the sunlight, gasping for air. The cold air felt like a shock to his lungs, but it was a welcome shock. He was out. He was safe. For now. Alex drove back to his apartment in a daze. The world outside seemed different now, a little less real. The mundane details of his life, traffic lights, billboards, people walking their dogs, felt like a foreign language. All he could think about was the voice, the symbol, and the missing boot. He had to find out what had happened here, what had taken Sam, and what it wanted with him. He went online searching for anything related to the whispering eye symbol or mysterious disappearances in his hometown. He found a local urban legend about the old factory, a story about a man named Michael Holbrook, a former factory worker who had gone insane and disappeared around the same time as Sam. People said he had been obsessed with a strange symbol and a humming sound that only he could hear. The same sound, the same symbol. It was all connected. The search results led him to an old dusty blog, a place where people would post about local legends and unexplained phenomena. The blog had a long, rambling post from Michael Holbrook himself. It was a journal, a confession, a cry for help. Michael wrote about the humming sound, the whispers it sent into his mind, and the symbol that had appeared to him in dreams. He said the hum was a gateway, a sort of radio signal from another dimension, and the symbol was the key to communicating with the entity on the other side. He wrote about what the entity wanted: children. It wanted their innocence, their memories, their very existence. He said it would whisper to the children, tell them to draw the symbol, to follow the hum, and to leave a piece of themselves behind, a toy, a drawing, a boot, something to prove they were real. And he wrote that he had helped the entity. He had been its earthly accomplice, its listener, and he had lured the children to the factory with promises of a magical place.
Alex's apartment had become a fortress of fear. The laptop screen cast a cold, flickering light on his face, illuminating the horror in his eyes. He scrolled through Michael Holbrook's blog. Each entry, a new brick in the wall of a nightmare he was desperately trying to tear down. Michael's writing grew more frantic with each post, the only coherent paragraphs devolving into a terrified confession, a descent into a madness so profound it felt contagious. The older entries detailed a seemingly benign beginning. Michael had been a janitor at the old factory, a quiet man who spent his nights alone, cleaning up the grease and grime of a day's work. It was in the silence of those late hours that he first heard it, a low, resonant hum. It started as a faint whisper, a barely perceptible thrumming that he thought was just the old machinery settling. But it grew, and with it came the whispers. They weren't in English or any language he knew. They were a feeling, a direct, unsettling communication that bypassed his ears and settled into his mind, telling him of things he couldn't comprehend. The whispers spoke of a place between, a void of a consciousness that craved to be anchored to the physical world. It needed a conduit, an anchor, and it needed a constant source of energy. It craved the innocence of children. Michael's sanity began to fray. The hum never stopped. It was in his dreams. He started drawing the symbol, the whispering eye, compulsively, scratching it onto every available surface. It was his way of communicating back, a frantic, silent prayer to whatever was on the other side. The hum promised him things, knowledge, power, and escape from his lonely life. All he had to do was help it. The price was small, it said, just a little piece of the world, a child's toy, a shoe, an old journal. These weren't just objects, they were keys. They were anchors to the physical world, and with each one, the entity's presence grew stronger, its voice clearer. And then, Michael's entries turned dark, detailing a desperate race against time. The hum began to demand more. It needed living anchors now, and it had a specific list. First on that list was a boy named Sam. Michael described a brief, terrifying encounter, a child's fearful eyes looking up at him as he lured him into the factory, promising a secret game. He wrote about the silence that followed, a silence that was more chilling than any sound he had ever heard. Michael said he had seen it, a grotesque, shifting form that fed on his child's essence, taking not just his life, but his memory, his very existence. The final entries were a desperate warning. Michael had realized the horrifying truth. The entity wasn't just using him, it was consuming him. His own memories were fading. His reflection in the mirror was no longer his own. He wrote that he had managed to create one last anchor,
something that could be used to fight back, a single physical link to the void that could be broken. He wrote that it was hidden in plain sight, in a place that the entity could not reach, a place where memories were kept safe. The entry ended with a chilling single line. "The last anchor is not lost. It is waiting to be found. Look for the memories that fade." Alex stared at the screen, the words burning into his mind. He wasn't just reading a confession. He was reading a map to a nightmare, a map that had been hidden for decades, waiting for someone to find it. He had a new goal now. He had to find this last anchor. He had to find out what it was and what it could do. But more importantly, he had to find out if it could save his friend. He had to finish what Michael had started. He closed the laptop, the sudden silence of the room more terrifying than the factory's hum. The game wasn't over. It had just begun.
Michael Holbrook's final blog entry was a frantic, desperate prayer that had been answered 25 years too late. Alex read the words, "the memories that fade," and "a place where memories are kept safe," over and over. He knew exactly what Michael meant. The last anchor wasn't in some hidden bunker or a secret vault. It was in the one place the entity couldn't fully corrupt or reach, a physical repository of memories. It had to be a place connected to Sam, a place that held the strongest memories of his life. There was only one place that fit that description: Sam's childhood home. Alex drove back to the house, but this time he wasn't driven by fear. He was driven by a grim determination. The house looked different in the evening light, its windows now resembling empty, hungry eyes. He didn't sneak in this time. He walked straight to the front door, kicked it open, and strode inside. He wouldn't let fear paralyze him again. The air inside was still and cold, heavy with the scent of mold and decay. But this time, Alex wasn't just hearing the house, he was seeing it. He saw fleeting shadows of a boy playing with his toy cars, a mother calling for her son from the kitchen. These weren't just memories, they were ghosts, memories that were fading. The entity was pulling them, feeding on them. It was a race against time, and Alex was running out of it. He headed straight for Sam's old bedroom, the central point of the nightmare. The room was colder than the rest of the house, and the whispering eye symbol on the closet wall glowed with a faint, malevolent light. He ignored it. He walked over to the closet, remembering the note he had found on the window pane: "Trust Buddy." He knew this wasn't about the bear anymore. It was about what the bear had tried to show him. He looked inside the closet, a place where a child's world was once kept, and then he saw it. Tucked away in the very back, behind a stack of old shoeboxes, was a small, dusty box. It wasn't a toy box. It was a shoebox with Sam's name written on the lid. Alex opened the shoebox. Inside, there were no shoes. Instead, there was a stack of old, worn photographs, a small, faded drawing of two stick figures holding hands, and a small, leather-bound journal. The journal had a strange, almost ethereal light coming from it. As he touched it, the air in the room grew colder, and the humming sound returned, but this time it was a screeching sound. The walls began to vibrate, and the light from the symbol on the closet wall grew brighter, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced around him. The air was filled with a chorus of voices, not just one, but 100, all whispering a single word: "Leave." The voices were not just in his ears, they were in his head, a telepathic assault that threatened to tear his mind apart. The voices were trying to make him forget, to make him believe this was all a dream, to make him believe he wasn't there. Alex knew what was happening. The entity was trying to sever his connection to this memory, to make him forget the last anchor. He fought back, holding on to the journal with all his might, his mind screaming in defiance. He wouldn't forget. He wouldn't let this nightmare win. He had to know what was in that journal. He had to find out what had happened to his best friend.
The voices in his head were a symphony of torment, a chaotic chorus of whispers and screams that clawed at the edges of his sanity. Alex gripped the journal, his knuckles white, fighting the overwhelming urge to drop it and flee. The room was spinning, the walls seeming to breathe as the symbols on them pulsed with a blinding crimson light. He saw fleeting images of other children, their faces distorted by fear, their eyes hollowed out and empty. He saw them giving away their cherished toys, a worn-out doll, a broken toy soldier, a rusted metal car, and he saw the symbols appearing in their homes. He realized with a dawning horror that Sam wasn't the first. The entity had been collecting for a long, long time. He forced his trembling hands to open the journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle with age, filled with a child's spidery handwriting. It was Sam's, but the contents were not what he expected. It wasn't a diary of a boy's life. It was a conversation. Sam had been writing to the entity. He had been a willing participant, drawn in by promises of a secret world and a special gift. Sam wrote about the voices that whispered to him through Buddy, the bear telling him about the secrets hidden in the shadows and the special people who could hear the hum. He had been so excited, so innocent, so ready to be a part of something magical. He wrote about the whispering eye symbol, calling it the mark of the chosen, and he wrote about the hollow-headed one, the entity's accomplice, the one who would lead the children to the gate. He was, of course, talking about Michael Holbrook. But the most terrifying revelation was on the last page. Sam wrote that the entity had told him he needed to bring someone with him, someone whose memories were so intertwined with his own that their absence would be a powerful anchor. Sam wrote that he was afraid, but he was also excited. He wrote that the entity told him that his friend, Alex, was the perfect candidate. A cold, paralyzing terror seized Alex. He looked down at the journal, at the child's scrawled words, and he knew. The hum he'd heard in the factory, the whispers, the chilling phrase, "We're not finished yet," they weren't about Michael. They were about him. The entity wasn't looking for Sam's final anchor. It was looking for him. He was the last piece of the puzzle. The memories that had been fading weren't just Sam's. They were his too, carefully being drained away over the past 25 years, a silent process of consumption that had been happening all along. The journal wasn't just a diary. It was a trap, a bait to lure him back, to bring him to the place where the final act would take place. He now understood what happened to Sam. Sam hadn't just vanished. He had been taken, a tragic pawn in a game he didn't understand. And now, the game was ready to begin again, with Alex as the final piece. He had to get out. He had to run. But as he turned to leave, the voices in his head were gone. The room was silent. The symbols on the wall were no longer glowing. All that was left was the chilling reality that he was completely, utterly alone. He was no longer a man searching for answers. He was a man being hunted.
The silence was a lie. Alex knew it in his bones. It was a predator's silence, a moment of deceptive calm before the final strike. The air in Sam's room felt heavy, almost solid, and the very walls seemed to pulse with a low, malevolent energy. The journal he held in his hands was not just a book, it was a weapon. It was the last anchor, the one thing that had defied the entity's consumption. Its pages held the horrifying truth of a child's last moments, the desperate confession of an accomplice, and the blueprint for an apocalypse that had been unfolding in plain sight for decades. Alex's mind raced, his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of fear and purpose. The entity wanted him.
It wanted him because his memories were intertwined with Sam's, because he was the final piece of the puzzle, the one last key that would open the door for good. The voice he had heard in the factory was not a threat. It was a promise. "We're not finished yet." It was a promise that the entity would hunt him until it had what it wanted. He had to run. He had to get out of that house and find a way to use the last anchor to stop this nightmare once and for all. He burst out of the room, not a moment too soon. The hallway, which had been dark and empty a moment ago, was now filled with a shimmering, almost translucent light. The air was filled with a chorus of voices. Not just one, but 100, all whispering his name, urging him to stop, to give up. He ran down the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty house. The whispers grew louder, and the shimmering light began to condense into a formless, shifting shadow. It was a mass of dark energy, a cloud of malevolence that rived and pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. Alex didn't look back. He ran out of the house and into the night, the cold air hitting him like a physical blow. The entity was no longer confined to the house. It was a part of the wind, a part of the darkness, a part of the world. He ran to his car, fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold them. He started the engine, the familiar sound a small comfort in the face of the incomprehensible terror he was facing. He drove, not knowing where he was going, only knowing that he had to get as far away from that house as possible. He drove for hours, the city lights blurring into a meaningless smear of color. He was a man with a target on his back, a man who had stumbled upon a secret that had been buried for decades. He was a man who had to fight a ghost, a nightmare, a force that defied all logic and reason. He had to find a way to use the journal, the last anchor, to sever the entity's connection to this world. But how? The journal itself was a weapon, but what were its instructions? He knew the answer was in its pages, in Sam's childlike writing. Alex drove to a quiet, secluded park, a place that felt safe, a place filled with laughter and innocence. He sat in his car, the engine still running, and opened the journal. The pages were still glowing with that faint, ethereal light. He flipped through the pages, reading Sam's heartbreaking entries, the innocent words of a child being manipulated by a force he couldn't comprehend. And then he saw it, a final, desperate drawing on the last page. It was a drawing of a child, holding a teddy bear, standing in front of a giant swirling vortex. Below the drawing, Sam had written in shaky, terrified handwriting, "Told Buddy to sing to the quiet." It was a riddle, a final desperate clue. Alex knew it was not random. It was a message, a last-ditch effort to stop the entity. But what did it mean? Sing to the quiet. It was not a physical act. It was a metaphorical one. It was a key to a secret he couldn't yet comprehend. He knew what he had to do. He had to go back to the factory. He had to go back to the source, and he had to sing to the quiet. He had to finish what Michael had started and what Sam had died trying to finish. He had to confront the entity one last time with the last anchor in his hand.
The return to the factory felt less like a journey and more like a descent into a nightmare. As his car's headlights cut through the darkness, Alex's mind raced, his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. The journal on the passenger seat was no longer a weapon. It was a horrifying Pandora's box. Sam's note, "Told Buddy to sing to the quiet," was not a key to victory, but a chilling cipher for a disaster. The factory's exterior was a colossal tomb. The moment he stepped inside, the humming sound began again, stronger now, more intense. The whispering eye symbols on the walls pulsed with a malevolent reddish light, as if they were alive. Alex realized these were not just drawings. They were the entity's gateways, a path it had forged into the physical world. The night Sam disappeared, those symbols were not mere childish scribbles. They were a roadmap, a blueprint drawn in a child's mind. Alex, gathering his courage, walked towards the source of the sound. The decaying machinery and shadowy corridors all seemed to reflect his deepest fears. He pointed his flashlight at a metal scrap,
and for a moment it took on the face of his father, calling out, "Son, come here." It was a living hallucination. The entity was using his most cherished memories against him, a mental assault designed to break him. He moved the beam to another piece of metal, and this time it morphed into the face of his childhood friend, Sam. "Alex, you brought me here that night. Why did you do it?" Sam's voice, a child's whisper, escalated into a terrified scream. "Why did you bring me here? You were a part of it." Alex's heart hammered in his chest. Sam's words were like daggers piercing his soul. "No, that's not true," he yelled back. But in the back of his mind, he knew Sam was right. Alex finally reached the center of the factory, where the humming was now an unbearable physical presence. A shape began to emerge from a pile of machinery. It was not a monster or a ghost, but something from his childhood. It was his teddy bear. "Hello, Alex," the bear whispered. The bear's whisper flooded Alex's mind with memories. That summer, that innocent summer. As a small boy, he had taken his friend Sam and his teddy bear, Buddy, into the forest. Sam had been talking to the bear. The bear was singing to him, but it was not a song. It was the entity's voice. Alex had been hearing that voice since he was a child. He could hear the whispers, the humming, the rhythm of the entity's consciousness. He'd heard the voice, and he had known that he had to follow it. That night, Alex had convinced Sam to play a game. They had gone to an old hut in the forest. Inside the hut, there was a symbol, the whispering eye. Sam had written a note next to it. "Trust the whispering eye, and it will trust you." And then Sam had left the note on Buddy. Alex had read that note, but he had forgotten. The entity had erased the memory. He wasn't just a witness. He was a part of it. He had convinced Sam to follow that symbol. The entity's purpose was not just to take children's memories and souls. It was using their essence to create a physical body for itself. It was using their souls to form a new being, a being that would one day conquer the world. Alex's soul, his memories, his body were just another piece of the puzzle. When Alex understood the truth, he began to tremble. "I am just a door," the bear whispered. "I am just a guide. It is here. It is with you. It is talking to you from your own mind." Alex finally understood. He had been living with that entity his entire life. He was a part of it. He was its guide. He was a reflection of that entity, a reflection of that hum, that whisper, that symbol. He had become one with it. He was a puppet, and he was that puppet. He was that entity.